Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar about analysing headlines over time, looking at how newspaper headlines have changed since the outbreak of COVID-19 at the start of this year and end of last year. My name's Sophie Sparks, and I'm the Community Manager here at the Information Lab. And I'm really proud to introduce my colleague from our German office, Benjamin Schulk, who'll be taking us through how he used Alteryx and Tableau to analyze how one of his favorite online newspapers, Spiegel, of course, that's a German newspaper, how their headlines changed over time since the beginning of the outbreak of coronavirus at the end of 2019. This is part of a series we're putting out around looking at data and Corona-19, but more importantly, how using the Corona-19, different types of Corona-19 data that's been put out, how you can use that to up your data skills and learn how to do different things. In this case, looking at how you can scrape titles out of online websites and use them to analyze information. So let's get started. Ben, would you be able to unmute yourself and share your screen?
Yes. Hi, Sophie. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen now. And it should be this one. All right. Yeah.
Perfect. Can see your screen brilliantly.
Yes. Perfect. Great. Yes. Thank you, Sophie. I'm a consultant and trainer for Tableau and Alteryx at the Information Lab Germany. I started off as a trainee 4.5 years ago, and since then I've worked with customers, I've worked with data, and naturally everything that I see in my everyday life is somehow related to kind of my work. And with this overall topic of the new coronavirus, I figured that my perception of everyday life has really changed, because I'm maybe one of the few ones who still consume online newspapers. And one of these newspapers is Der Spiegel, which is one of the largest German online and also paper newspapers that still exist. And over time, and I think I realized that there was this new coronavirus kind of early on. Over time, a couple of weeks ago, I thought, hey, I don't see anything else. So before January, before February, there was still a couple of articles or many articles about other big society issues like uprising populism, right-wing parties, Fridays for Future, and all that stuff. And at some point, I just figured it was all gone. You can see der Spiegel.de online on my screen. Sorry for the German articles, but if we scroll over it, you will spot a lot of Corona articles, as I like to call them for now, on this newspaper. So there is a career of handballer Glandorf during Corona. There is ghost matches for the Bundesliga, which is the German football league. 5 theories about COVID-19, anti-Corona bills, mask duty, and all that kind of stuff. And pretty much everything is about Corona, even upcoming Ramadan, right? You create a title, an article about the Ramadan, and you make it about Corona. So I wanted to see how these articles and how the focus of the articles and all of the production of Spiegel Online changed over time, and whether this got more intense. So the first thing I tried was looking around and to see where was the easiest part to get this information from. And of course, there's no database for an online newspaper. get all the articles and analyze them. So I'll have to get the data from the website itself. And okay, I'm seeing my internet connection is unstable, but I hope we can make it through this. As you may see, there is a topic on the top here, and it says coronavirus. And if I click on it, we see all the articles about the coronavirus. And I figured, okay, let's see how the number of these articles increases or decreases over time. And I went over this website, I downloaded it, and then this first draft came out of it. So this has downloaded data from 1st of January this year until I think 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago. And there was the first thing I saw was that the number of corona articles really increased really heavily to a total number of 1,400 articles about corona in about 8 or 9 weeks, which was for me really crazy that you could produce such an amount of content around one specific topic. But this does not answer a lot of questions like, are other topics less important? Is this topic specifically increasing interest, or is this more a focus? So I wanted to look at whether the percentage share of articles about corona has increased. And this, to make this possible, I had to download all the articles and then parse out which of these articles were about the new coronavirus and which not. To do that, I used Alteryx, and using Alteryx or other tools, you can simply download websites as text. So basically, if we right-click on this page, I kind of do a right-click and show the source code. And if we look at this source code of this page, this is basically what we will download, and then we will read it, and we will filter it, and we will see whether it contains information about corona or not. We will walk through that process in a minute. But what I also figured is that I need a more reliable source than this coronavirus topic, and maybe also more reliable than the start page. There is, fortunately, a news archive. So basically, what they have is they have the headlines of all of their articles, or of their headlines. It's probably not exactly the same. Where you can loop through. So basically, we see all the articles from April 21st. And what we can do is we can also go to April 14th, for example, and see what was published on that day. The nice thing is that you may see this. You may see this in the URL here. There is the date, and it can easily be looped over. So we can go through this page and download all the article numbers or names on this website for each day until a certain date. So this is the first thing that I did, and this is Alteryx. For those who don't know, it's an ETL tool, or it's an advanced analytics tool with strong ETL capabilities. And I used one workflow to download a list of articles. And basically, I simply insert this URL, use a macro to loop over all of these websites, these dates, get the data out, and I could run it. But let's have a little look at the macro first. So basically what it does is it takes the URL, it downloads it, and then does a lot of stuff. It looks complicated, but it really is not. So basically we are parsing information out between the header and the footer. We are going through the rest and do a little bit of regular expressions to to basically filter out all the necessary information that we need to get to the real URL to be able to download the actual article themselves, right? Only the headers, they can help us to some point, but maybe there are articles about the new coronavirus that are not using the specific terms in the titles. So basically the first step we need is to run through and get a list of all articles. And then we need to download all the articles that we just got from the list and analyze whether they are about Corona really. So this macro does download a list until we can, this is now downloading until 17th of April. We can make this a little bit shorter, maybe until yesterday, so we can easily run this and see what happens. So let me just quickly run this. So this runs through and we have downloaded a couple of articles, and what it does is that we see down here, we have a link, a URL, a title of the article, what resort it is from, and when it was published. And this list goes to a simple database that I've put together, which is essentially this list. So the next step is then basically go over this list and download all the links basically that we have parsed out here using another workflow. You could have, of course, done that in one simple or one single workflow, but I decided to break it down into a couple of workflows to manage it easier, because I don't always want to download all the articles. So the second workflow is about downloading all the articles in this list. And what we can do really quickly here is to say, okay, we only want to download 1 or 2 articles. Let me just really quickly select only 2 or 3 records here. So we are going to do everything until the second record. And this should be rather quick. So we are downloading 2 articles here. And this is the data that comes out. So I don't know how good you can see that, but this downloads all the source code that we just saw in the browser. And writes it to a local data source, right? So we are downloading every single article in its entirety. And then, of course, we need to run through all of these articles to see whether they are about the coronavirus. So I'm going to do that in a separate workflow. And again, we can use only a couple of these to check what's going on, not the record ID tool. I'm just going to delete that again and use the select records. And again, let's do only 10 articles, right? So we're inputting all the articles, the entire content that we just downloaded. Select only 10 out of these. And then, okay, you see it takes a little time. And then basically run through the entire text and search for specific terms, like whether it contains the word corona, or whether it contains the word COVID, or some other terms that I personally relate to the greater topic of coronavirus. Of course, that might be skewed. For example, I also searched for the term virus, and of course, there are much more viruses than the coronavirus, right? So there will be times when articles are flagged as corona articles, when it's really about maybe the regular flu or some other virus that may have happened earlier. So there's a little bit of uncertainty in this data, but for my purpose, that was totally fine, because I just wanted to see whether the number of articles or the share of articles really went up. and a little bit of unsecurity was fine for me at that point. So basically, what we can see here is the formula that I used to see whether an article was about corona or not. Right, the body contains corona, or it contains COVID, or it contains virus, or epidemie, which is German for epidemic or pandemic. Right, some search terms that I relied on, and then I output that to a Tableau Hyper file, which I would then analyze. So this was the first step, and with this I was able to analyze whether the number of articles and whether the share of articles about corona went up during time. What I then figured was, okay, there must be some kind of correlation between the relevance of this topic and the number of articles. And this is when I decided to also download some source of the number of cases. And I decided to download the data from the Open Data ECDC, which is, let's really quickly use that and open it in the browser and check it out. Okay, now I downloaded the CSV file. This is not, this is fun, right? This is stuff that happens when you don't try it first. Okay, so I downloaded basically a CSV file from the ECDC website. There it is. And they provide CSV files where you can download weekly data for the number of cases for all the countries in the world. And so I wanted to analyze whether the number of diagnosed cases or reported cases and the number of reported deaths somehow influenced the number of articles or the share of articles that were written about this topic. And in the end, I was able to put together a Tableau workbook based on these two data sources. And I thought this was really, really impactful because somehow my everyday reality is kind of shaped by the news I consume. And if I see what's going on, this can change my perspective on life. So basically, we can look at the number of articles that contain the term coronas or the terms about corona. And we see that over time, starting in December last year, there were a high number of articles. Of course, there's something going on about the first week of December here, or the first and second week. There was a lot of production. I don't know. I don't remember what was back then. But then we see a drop in number of articles during Christmas. But there was no mention of the coronavirus in any titles. And we see the red line is the number of titles that contain some corona-related terms. And we see it's almost the same number in the beginning and the middle of March. And we see a really, really heavy increase. And it has stayed almost the same until last week. So the last time when I fetched the data was yesterday. Okay, so now we can analyze what is the percentage share, right? It should be about 50%, and we see it's true. We see a heavy increase in the share, which is pretty much just another visualization focused on the share instead of the real numbers. And we see from a top value of 74 or 47, 48%, it has gone down to 42%, but it's still a really, really big issue or big topic. But then we talked about that not only the articles could be about corona, but also the real body, the real text in the article. And if we look at that, then we see a different picture. So not only the articles that contain corona, also the so basically we have articles that contain corona in title and article. We have articles that contain the corona virus only in the article, and then there is 1 or 2 articles, I think, that contain corona only in the title and not in the body, which was kind of an outlier for me, but yeah, it's still there. And so a good portion of the values or of the articles that don't have corona in their title still have it in the article itself, in the body. And these make up both more than the articles that don't have corona at all in them. So let's have a look at the percentage. And this was really, when I first saw this number, I could almost not believe it. But let's have a look at it. And we see the total number of articles that were about corona was over 80%. And it has been about 80% since March 16th, or the week of March 16th. And I found that really, really amazing, because 80% is really a lot, because it means that you basically don't see anything else besides it. What we can see in this visualization as well is that the number of articles with corona only in the title has decreased, but at the same time the number of articles with corona only in the article itself and not in the title has increased, right? So the overall number, or the overall share of articles about the virus has stayed pretty much the same, but the focus has shifted from virus or corona cells to let's talk about something, or let's advertise our article with a title that not necessarily has the coronavirus in it. So we have a total share of articles about the coronavirus of about 80%. And then, of course, let's have a look at the number of cases and deaths and the number of articles, and whether there is a correlation. So what we can see here is the number of cases and the number of deaths, and this is the really just the number of cases and the number of deaths as 2 curves. And we see that we have an increase in the articles about the coronavirus when the number of cases went up for the first time here, right? And it has pretty much stayed the same as the coronavirus cases went up and down a little. I think in this week, China reported quite a lot of cases, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. And it goes up and up to 80%. And then, of course, we don't have a curve that can go over 100%. So interest is still high, but it stays at this high level as the number of cases and the number of deaths increases over time. But of course, in my mind, it's not equally important whether someone dies in China or someone dies in my neighborhood. I know it's hard to say, or it's harsh to say, but somehow it's really different, because it's so abstract. It's not concerning me, right? So I wanted to look at whether the number of cases in Germany, or in the nearer distance or nearer locations, were driving interest more than the number of cases that were farther away. So we can go in, and this doesn't look really nice, but what we can see is that we have the United States of America, and they are a little bit behind with the interest in Germany, right? So the number of articles about the coronavirus went up before the number of cases in America went up. So America, well, it's in terms of articles about the coronavirus, it's not really relevant. So maybe you could go ahead and, okay, I cannot exclude it. No, okay, I just excluded the week here. But what we could see is that the cases in, and this is China here, the first spike going up here. This has then, back then in February, this has basically driven interest in the first articles about the coronavirus. But then it decreased. So the number of articles still increased, right? It went up, even though the number of cases in China went down. So there must be something different. And what we can see is that there is Italy, and there is Spain, and there is Germany, right? So we have France. So we have a couple of countries that are more in our neighborhood where they report cases, and this makes it more urgent to talk about it. And of course, we can have a look at that over time. So let's look at the last slide here. So basically, we can look at our distribution of corona cases in the world, and we can have a look at it over time on the bottom. So if we slide through this through time, basically we see that nothing really was going on the start of December. And there were only a few cases in China. Skip through to next week, right? The red button down here is something that I defined as Central Europe. Let me make this bigger maybe, right? Something that I defined as Central Europe, which is pretty much just a selective group of values that I defined as Central Europe, not some kind of official combination of values. Okay, so we see in January still a low number of cases and also a low share of articles. And this does not change until January 2020, right? We see from 1 week before that a lot of more countries reported cases, and the number of corona articles and the share of corona articles went up to 7%. We had only 3 cases in France, but the coronavirus spread across Asia, and there were first reported cases in Northern America and Europe. Moving to the next week, coronavirus spreads throughout Europe. Our interest goes up to 14%, and these are only so low because the later values are very high, right? So moving through January and February, let's stop it here, right? We see that we have a really, really high number of cases in China, cumulative number of cases over time. And we still only have pretty much the same amount of, let's call it interest or share of articles about the coronavirus in Spiegel at this point. And what happens now? So we see that the rest of the world is kind of staying the same. And we see that 28% are now a share, as we see that the coronavirus spreads more and more across Europe and cases go up, which we will see during the next weeks. So we see that down here, I think Italy started really soon, and our interest is at 27% by now. And the cases start to rise in Europe, the bubbles get bigger, and also our line goes up to 61%. Moving one step further, Central Europe begins to overtake the rest of the world in terms of coronavirus cases and cumulative cases. And suddenly the interest or the share of articles spikes to 81%. And this is pretty much the point where we cannot go further with the share of articles because, of course, newspapers still have to report about something else than just the virus, right? And then we stay at this point, and then the US starts with their epidemic, basically, right? And we see that the US really overtakes everyone in the world, even though Central Europe still reports much more cases than China back then. And we're still interested, and Spiegel still creates a lot of articles about this virus, even though this has been around at this level for 4 or 5 weeks, right? So this really helped me understanding what's defined. What is defining my view of how I see the world. Spiegel is one of the few newspapers that I consume, and if this only creates articles or publishes articles about the coronavirus, then I only read articles about coronavirus. So it's really hard to find something else, find something about topics that don't have anything to do with this. And yeah, this kind of leads me to somehow get my focus to something else, as I maybe kind of, not, I'm kind of satisfied with the input that I get about the coronavirus. So it's okay for me by now. I know it's around and I want to be informed, but I don't want to be overwhelmed by all the information by it. So I have to actively search for other information if I want it. So this is pretty much how I went through it. It's not too complex to actually do that stuff. The only pitfalls that you might have is that you need to actually find a structure in the data that you're downloading and then parsing the information out that you need. And as soon as you have that data, you can simply visualize it, analyze it, and share it. A couple of remarks at this point. Web scraping is at least a gray area. So not everyone is really happy as you scrape their websites. Spiegel Online has a history of web scraping, so there are a couple of articles and blog posts about scraping their newspaper. There was a great analysis about how the different articles are structured in networks, or someone analyzed the comments below articles, right? So my assumption was they were okay with it. And of course, the numbers are not 100% correct. I had this funny case when I tried to somehow make sure the numbers are at least a little bit more correct than not, was that I went through these articles, and what came up is that mount and banner lords in tests. I don't know if anyone of you knows this, but Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord is a video game. And this was flagged as contains corona. And I went through it. I opened this and I read it entirely, and there is not a single term about corona. So I figured there must be something wrong. What actually is that it's the case that there is one link to a specific article here, where the Spiegel, co-workers of the Spiegel are talking about which video games they play during quarantine. And the link contains the term corona. So basically, this is part of the article, and this is why it's flagged as corona, even though it doesn't have anything to do with it. So this kind of this kind of things can happen during web scraping. So of course the numbers are not 100% correct. I tried to filter out some footers that are, of course, containing links to the coronavirus, right? So there is a tag about corona and so on. I tried to exclude them, but of course it wasn't always possible. So if I'm going to publish it, or if you're going to replicate some kind of this analysis with your own local newspapers, maybe, then just be careful that the numbers won't be 100% correct, probably. All right, so that was it, I think, from my side. Sophie,
Hi.
Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for going through all of that for us, Ben. One question I do have is the Tableau visualization you stepped us through.
Yes.
Is that published on Tableau Public, or can people view it anywhere?
Not yet.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure the numbers are kind of
that makes sense. Okay, so if you do publish it on Tableau Public, please let me know, and I will put the link up in the recording to this session.
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, that's all the questions we have coming through. Thank you so much, Ben, for taking us through how to get headline data using Alteryx out of websites. And also thank you for that very responsible ending, talking about web scraping and whether it is allowed on websites before you do it. So please, everybody, do check before you go ahead and scrape the headlines out of your local newspapers. Make sure that they are okay for web scraping to occur. And also thank you for taking us through your findings, which are quite surprising, which shows that our perception of what's going on in the world seems to be largely shaped by the main headlines we're reading in the news. So I think that was a very interesting finding. So thank you so much for that. And everyone who's joined in, I hope you've enjoyed Ben's talk, and I hope you feel inspired to go ahead and learn a little bit about web scraping yourself. At the moment, Alteryx is offering a 1-month free trial on its Alteryx Designer desktop application, the one that Ben showed and used to get this data down. So you can go ahead and download a free trial if you do not already have the software yourself, and have a go. So thank you so much for that. And from me and from Ben, since we're calling in from Europe, I hope you have a good evening. And depending when and where in the world you are, I hope you're having a good morning or a good afternoon as well. Thank you so much for dialing in.
Thank you.